American Comics. My Warhammer Simulator Chapter 481 to 490. The most stubborn moment for a person is when they believe they are without fault. And in the eyes of the Punisher, Frank, everyone present was a Hydra remnant deserving of death. However, when they loudly proclaimed that Rogers was Captain Hydra, Rogers, usually calm and collected, took a deep breath. He strode forward and snatched the severely injured Punisher from Doom's metal grasp. Then, eyes wide, Rogers questioned, almost shouting each word. "Tell me, Punisher, who provided you with this information? Someone must have given you this absurd idea, otherwise, you couldn't even make this up." Unfortunately, Rogers' furious questioning was met only with a mouthful of bloody saliva and a low, cold laugh from the bruised and battered Punisher. "Hey, since becoming the Punisher, I, Frank, have dared to do anything, dared to kill anyone, but I would never betray my friends. You Hydra remnants can just forget about it." At this moment, Rogers, his face as cold as ice, suddenly released the Punisher. He let the severely injured man fall heavily onto the marble floor, then said in a deep voice, "Perhaps most people only remember me as Captain America, but they forget that I am also a soldier with blood on his hands. On the battlefield, we would do anything to get information." Just as Rogers was about to signal the eager assassin monkey to begin interrogation, Doom, who had been watching the show from the sidelines, suddenly received a silent signal from Luo Shaw. The dark green cloak draped over his silver power armor billowed without wind. Doom suddenly raised both hands and quickly cast the bewitchment magic he controlled. Chi, chi, chi. Instantly, the Punisher collapsed on the ground. As well as Rogers and his two teammates, were forcibly mind-controlled by Doom's bewitchment magic. Lord Luo Shaw, Rogers and the Punisher have very strong willpower and resistance. My bewitchment magic may not last long. Doom, keeping his hands raised in front of him, said without hesitation to Luo Shaw, who was slowly rising from his seat. "It doesn't matter, David, draw a tube of blood from everyone. Doom, try to use your bewitchment magic to get some information out of them. We'll use both methods to verify Rogers' true identity and find the mastermind behind spreading the rumors from the Punisher." At this moment, Luo Shaw, driving his vibranium power armor, quickly said to the others present with a blank expression. Luo Shaw did not believe the Punisher's claims about Rogers being Captain Hydra. However, the gang dog rebellion that had just occurred made him more cautious. Moreover, he believed that even if Rogers woke up, he would understand his actions. Soon after, Iron Man David came to Luo Shaw with 4 tubes of blood from Rogers and the others in his metal hands. Luo Shaw, with an indifferent expression, looked down and examined them. He raised his hand, picked up Rogers' blood, tilted his head back, and poured it into his mouth. Then, Luo Shaw closed his eyes slightly and began to activate the genetic reconnaissance nerve in his body. In an instant, fragments of Rogers' early life flashed through his mind. The endless ridicule from countless children because of his short stature, and the protection from his only childhood friend, Bucky. The pride and complacency of becoming a super soldier and fighting alongside his friend on the battlefield. The sadness and grief of losing his friend. And, the most regrettable and memorable thing in Rogers' short first half of his life, that missed date, that dance that could never be fulfilled. After the memory fragments dissipated, Luo Shaw slowly opened his eyes. He subconsciously looked at Rogers, who was being interrogated by Doom's bewitchment magic, and then shook his gray-haired head slightly. "I'm still too suspicious, it makes me seem like a bad guy." Luo Shaw muttered self-deprecatingly. Immediately afterward, he picked up the blood belonging to Duggan and Assassin Monkey and performed memory verification, and there were no shocking discoveries. Only the complexity of Assassin Monkey's monkey life made Luo Shaw inadvertently take a few more glances at him. Finally, Luo Shaw tilted his head back and tasted the Punisher's blood. After the tidal wave of memory fragments had completely subsided, Luo Shaw slowly opened his eyes and couldn't help but reveal an icy smile. "Tisk, finally found you," according to the Punisher's memory fragments. He accidentally encountered a SHIELD agent who came to mediate when he was playing a killing game with a large group of gangsters on the Mexican border. And the other party's name was Sitwell. If Luo Shaw's memory was correct. This guy was one of the high-level Hydra agents who infiltrated S.H.I.E.L.D. And during the subsequent period, the Slum incident occurred. The Punisher, who hated evil like a foe, wanted to find the Terrastar Legion to carry out an assassination. And the American Hydra, who also wanted to know some things, took the opportunity to make Agent Sidwell the Punisher's contact. Of course, in the Punisher's eyes, this was S.H.I.E.L.D.'s support and help to him. And the two sides became friends during this period. In addition, Agent Sidwell also introduced Crossbones, Rumlow to the Punisher. And Crossbones was the Hydra leader under Alexander Pierce, the leader of the American Hydra. And after Tony, who also belonged to the Inquisition, obtained the advice of Luo Shaw and others and personally killed Alexander Pierce, Agent Sidwell and Crossbones Rumlow did not choose to disappear. They attempted to use some conspiracies and means to completely plunge S.H.I.E.L.D. into a state of division or war, paying a painful price for Pierce's death. And because Empire Industries would appear at the scene after the Terrastar Legion's battles to carry out a large amount of cleanup work, Crossbones and others immediately judged that Empire Industries must be an auxiliary institution of the Terrastar Legion, because most organizational forces also did this. So, Madame Gao, as the real leader of Empire Industries, was also successfully placed on the death schedule. Because they believed that the Terrastar Legion, whose style of action and combat methods were extremely cruel, would not tolerate any infringement and would inevitably have fierce war conflicts with S.H.I.E.L.D. Even using lies and false information to arrange the Punisher's assassination of Rogers was to further divide S.H.I.E.L.D. And the above information is actually the result of Iron Man David's intelligence analysis based on comprehensive data after Luo Shaw, Iron Man David, and Doom shared the Punisher's memories. Perhaps some of the content still has discrepancies and deviations from the real situation. But Luo Shaw and Doom believed that it should be about the same. However, if Iron Man David's judgment was not wrong, the most speechless thing for Luo Shaw was that if he really wanted to get to the bottom of it. Although Madame Gao's death was done by Crossbones and others, the initial source actually came from himself. After all, he also voted in favor of Tony's Inquisition operation to assassinate Pierce. Thank you all for your support. The loyal Silver Sable led her security team, dragging the severely injured Punisher away from Luo Shaw. The Punisher was not the real murderer who killed Mrs. Gao. He was just a failed assassin deceived by Hydra's lies. However, due to the Punisher's stubborn personality, Luo Shaw planned to brainwash him and keep him for later use. Soon after, Rogers, relying on his willpower to break free from the control of the bewitching witchcraft, was about to lose his temper at Luo Shaw and the others. He was immediately drawn to the surveillance data and many clues presented by Iron Man David. Damn it, Sidwell and Crossbones Rumlow are actually Hydra agents. Before I came here, I even told Rumlow about some follow-up work processes. I didn't expect that they were the real culprits who wanted me dead the most. At this moment, Rogers, whose emotions were somewhat out of control, kicked over a chair next to him. He frowned and cursed in a low voice. Watch your language, Rogers. Luo Shaw, wearing vibranium-powered armor, said without even looking up. Now that we have our mission objectives, no matter what you personally think, Rogers, I plan to send these guys my warm regards, but with my bolter. Doom, order the Lamenter's first company to prepare for battle. David, have Redditus move a batch of whirlwind missile launchers over here. Wait, Luo Shaw. At this moment, Rogers, with a serious expression, turned to look at Luo Shaw, who was issuing orders. Are you planning to wipe out the entire S.H.I.E.L.D.? I'm not deaf yet. What are whirlwind missile launchers, large missile launchers? Those are just some more powerful rockets. More explosive big guys aren't ready to appear yet. What's wrong? Are you, as a battle-hardened super soldier, still not determined? Luo Shaw waved his hand expressionlessly, instructing Doom and Iron Man David to go and prepare for battle. Rogers hesitated for a moment. He also had Duggan and Monkey the Hitman follow along, taking advantage of Luo Shaw's weapons and equipment. Luo Shaw, to be honest, I never thought that after waking up from the ice, I would face such a corrupt situation. I thought we had won the war and would usher in a more open and enlightened free world. However, from the day I woke up, conflicts and wars, large and small, are constantly being staged in every corner of this world. Some people are for profit, some people are for survival. It's not that I can't understand or don't understand, but no one has ever told me what's wrong with this world. Rogers sighed suddenly, rubbing his brow, and murmured in a heavy tone. Luo Sha turned his eyes and remained silent for a moment before saying to him, Rogers, although you and I have had fierce conflicts due to different positions, since we have known each other for so long, we should be considered friends, right? I can't say that my understanding is the correct answer, so you can listen and see. Maybe it can bring you a different perspective. Everything that troubles you is actually human nature and instinct, but it is this competitive nature that has brought the human race from countless primitive people to the world today. It is also this nature that allows humans to unite and explode with considerable resilience when facing many disasters. Of course, humans without a true leader are just a mess. Perhaps a long period of peaceful life has made you forget one thing, that survival is originally a difficult thing. If you zoom out and look at the entire universe, you will find that many alien races are constantly dying out or being born every day. Most humans are still huddled on Earth. Some means to enter the universe are firmly blocked by our major forces, but one day, humans will need to look up at the starry sky, or face enemies from beyond the starry sky. This is the inescapable fate of native humans, and as one of the heroes of humanity, even if you, Rogers, are unwilling to bear this heavy responsibility, the development of things will often push people forward. I have a friend, or rather, a brother. Don't look at me like that, he's really just a brother. Many years ago, he fell into a dormant state due to severe injuries. Before he went dormant, he also thought that the citizens of the empire after countless years would be stronger and more prosperous. However, when he woke up, he found that his home was far more dilapidated and decadent than it was countless years ago. He despaired, he complained, and he even wanted to return to the dormant state again, but he still chose to grit his teeth and shoulder the responsibility to continue leading the citizens of the empire forward. Why? Because if humans stop, the cold universe will not bring any warmth to the defeated races, only ruthless destruction. Tisk, maybe you don't understand the weight and meaning of my words at all, but one day, you will understand. At this moment, Luo Sha, shaking his head slightly, drove the vibranium-powered armor and slowly stood up. He walked to Rogers' side, raised his hand and patted the pensive man. Come on, Rogers, let's go kill some people together and relieve our depressed mood. Luo Sha, I have a question, your brother shouldn't be from Earth, right? To some extent, he is indeed human, but he is not quite the same as the humans you imagine. Similar to the degree of white people and black people? If we are a little more rigorous, it may be the difference between a Tyrannosaurus rex and a mouse. However, my scientific foundation is relatively poor. If you really want to know the truth, I can let Doom explain it to you separately. Luo Sha, I think you should read more books. Shut up, Rogers. Boom boom boom. Along with the huge roar of the vectored engines of the Thunderhawk transport aircraft. The fully armed Lamenter's first company quickly boarded the interior of the cabin. The Astartes, holding bolters and carrying chainswords, were ready for battle. Rogers and others, who had scrounged a set of carapace armor from Iron Man David, also held shields and laser guns, following Luo Sha into the cabin. Rogers finally made up his mind. He plans to use Luo Sha's Astartes to clean up the last Hydra remnants in S.H.I.E.L.D. As for how to distinguish the enemies mixed in with the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents. Simply put, anyone who dares to shoot Captain America is a villain and bad guy who needs to be completely eliminated. Of course, everyone's mission objectives are also different. Luo Sha is to bring bolter retribution and revenge to Crossbones and others who assassinated Mrs. Gao. Rogers, on the other hand, intends to take advantage of the moral high ground to reclaim and retain S.H.I.E.L.D. from Nick Fury's hands as much as possible. Accompanied by the low rumble and subtle vibrations from the vector engines. Inside the dimly lit cabin of the Thunderhawk, Rogers and the others, clad in full sets of carapace armor, were continuously familiarizing themselves with the Terra pattern lasguns in their hands. In fact, Rogers was initially reluctant to wear this heavy single-person armor. On one hand, he trusted his vibranium shield, which he wielded as if it were a third arm, capable of defending against attacks from any enemy. On the other hand, it was also because his fighting style leaned more towards agility and flexibility. Unless it was a one-on-one duel with an enemy, under normal circumstances. The World War II antique Rogers could dominate most battlefields with his vibranium shield. However, Roshar, grinning, immediately demonstrated the power of bolt rounds and lasers, successfully proving one thing to the slightly arrogant Rogers. That is, with the advancement of technology, Steve, times have changed. Thus, Rogers, with wide eyes, and his two teammates, Dum-Dum Dugan and the chattering hit monkey, had to obediently put on the carapace armor. After all, on a chaotic battlefield, stray bullets from friendly forces are indiscriminate. Click. At this moment, with a light click, Rogers finished his preparations by inserting a spare battery for the lasgun and several high-explosive grenades onto his waist. He was just about to turn his head to reveal the coordinates of the SHIELD Command Headquarters, the hub, to Roshar and the others. Roshar's indifferent voice quickly came through the communication device inside the carapace armor helmet. "No need for that. Natasha told us long ago. If I hadn't been busy recently, I would have already led people to raid your branch bases to acquire some alien technology to supplement the team. Well, I should have expected this when Natasha became one of your subordinates." As soon as Roshar finished speaking, Rogers, with a hint of helplessness on his face, stopped himself from speaking. He quickly sorted out the emotions in his heart, then asked Roshar with a serious expression. "Roshar, what's our attack plan?" "Plan?" Roshar, who was looking down at the metal 10 rings, shifted his gaze. He looked up at Rogers across the cabin and said, "Step 1. David will jam all communication frequencies within the hub, and 100 kilometers radius, cutting off all SHIELD's communication with the outside world. Since your headquarters is located deep within the sparsely populated Colorado Plateau, there are no civilians nearby to evacuate, so we can go all out. My Astartes company will first occupy important facilities like the airport tarmac and parking platforms to prevent airborne units from taking off and anti-aircraft weapons from activating. Then, we'll continuously bombard with Cyclone missile launchers." "Wait, Roshar, I remember you saying those were quite powerful rockets, right? Didn't we agree just to eliminate the remnants of Hydra? If we attack with such overwhelming force, I don't think there will be many survivors left in the SHIELD headquarters, will there?" Rogers, whose eyes widened subconsciously, quickly raised his hand to stop Roshar's explanation. He stared at the other man's face and said earnestly, "Tisk, when poor, use tactical infiltration. When rich, use firepower saturation. Sorry, I'm used to fighting rich battles. For your sake, Rogers, we'll temporarily cancel the Cyclone missile bombardment. Unless SHIELD's airborne vehicles successfully take off, heavy weapons will not be used at all. However, the Astartes are also very skilled at stealth infiltration in squad mode. They can handle any battlefield situation they encounter." Roshar, slightly raising his eyebrows, waved his hand. After thinking for a moment, he said to Rogers, "The fewer casualties in this battle, the better. And before the attack begins, I need to make a call to the SHIELD headquarters through the full-spectrum communication channel, in the name of Captain America, to rally the true SHIELD agents to resist the enemy within. Hydra deserves to die, but the SHIELD agents are also innocent people. After all, most people in headquarters are just low-level clerical staff." At this moment, Rogers, with a serious expression, took a deep breath. He slowly said to Roshar across from him with a slightly pleading look, "All right, I can't promise not to harm any innocents, after all, bullets on the battlefield have no eyes, but I can guarantee that my men will not kill innocents, and will not let a single Hydra escape." Roshar gazed at Rogers and nodded. He made a promise to the other man in a calm tone. At this moment, Rogers, a smile appearing at the corner of his mouth, also nodded heavily. Then his tone suddenly shifted, and he said softly, "Anyway, I have to thank you for everything, whether it was saving my life before, or this cleanup operation related to SHIELD. Oh, can I ask one more question?" "Rogers, you'd better actually have a question. You always call your company Astartes. What exactly does this Astartes mean?" "Well, actually, Astartes means Space Marine, because they were born to fight for humanity across the galaxy, dedicating their lives and loyalty. Roshar, with a smile, straightened his tall body clad in vibranium power armor. He explained to Rogers with a proud tone. Soon after, the flight formation led by the Thunderhawk transport plane piloted by Iron Man David entered the Air Defense Identification Zone of the SHIELD headquarters, hub. And Iron Man David, who had already made preparations, successfully made the entire flight formation disappear from radar scans. Immediately after, 10 Thunderhawk transport planes carrying half of the Cryptex company quickly changed their flight direction and detached from the continuously advancing flight formation. Their mission was to assault and occupy SHIELD's large airport and parking platforms from other directions, to prevent the escape of important target individuals and the harassment of airborne units. Meanwhile, Iron Man David, who had quickly taken control of all SHIELD communication frequencies, also raised a metal hand inside the dimly lit cabin. "My lord, the full channel broadcast is now active. Mr. Rogers can proceed with the call to action." As soon as Iron Man David finished speaking, the expressionless Roshar nodded at Rogers. The next second, Rogers, taking a deep breath, slowly put on his carapace armor helmet. He began an emotional speech in a low, powerful voice. "Attention all SHIELD agents, this is Steve Rogers. Perhaps you are more familiar with my other title, the one everyone knows well, Captain America. About a dozen hours ago, I unexpectedly encountered a sniper assassination attempt, but with the help of a friend, I fortunately survived. And after interrogating the arrested assassin, I also learned some shocking inside information and truths. I think agents who have been with SHIELD for many years may have already noticed something amiss, that today's SHIELD has changed. It is no longer the special defense agency established to protect the country and its people, but has gradually become a vast power full of interests and ambition. We have begun to arbitrarily trample on the country's laws, disregard the freedom of all ordinary people, we lie, we steal, we kill. But this was not the original intention of my old friends Howard Stark and Peggy Carter when they established the Strategic Scientific Reserve, the predecessor of SHIELD. I once simply thought this was just because times had changed, but later I discovered that times actually hadn't changed, because the main reason SHIELD has reached this point today is that our interior has been infiltrated by Hydra. The true identity of the deceased Alexander Pierce was one of Hydra's leaders, so the SHIELD faction he led was actually Hydra under a different name. And Agent Sidwell's men and the special forces led by Crossbones Rumlow were embedded Hydra agents. I don't know how many more Hydra agents are lurking inside the hub headquarters, but I know they are right beside you. Therefore, with the help of friends, I have decided to launch a cleanup operation targeting Hydra. Next, you will see a large number of metal giants descending from the sky. They are friendly forces coming to support SHIELD. For the safety of all of you, please do not attack them without authorization. I know this sudden truth is difficult for all SHIELD agents to accept for a while. But that is the reality. If you do not pick up your guns and resist, then SHIELD will soon be reborn as another Hydra, and they were truly just a step away from succeeding. After all, the price of freedom is so high, and I am willing to pay that price, even if I am the only one who supports this belief. I will fight forever. But I believe I am not the only one willing to fight for freedom, am I? This is Steve Rogers, Captain America. I await and hope for the resistance of all SHIELD agents. At this moment, Rogers, taking another deep breath, ended the full channel broadcast to the SHIELD agents. He let out a slow sigh, his shifting gaze meeting Roshar's narrowed eyes. "Tisk, to be honest, Rogers, during that free time just now, did you draft that speech in advance? This doesn't seem like impromptu speaking at all." Roshar, subconsciously wiggling his chin, gazed at Rogers in front of him. He asked with admiration in his tone, "My level is actually inferior to your declaration of human supremacy that you made to the whole world back then. The psychological experts at SHIELD once analyzed your linguistic logic and speech style, and they unanimously believed that if you were given more opportunities to grow, you might become the second, little mustache, leader who triggers World War III. Hey, I will continue to work hard. Thank you all for your support." Accompanied by the heavy, dull sound of magnetic boots heavily crushing the concrete floor. Assault squads and heavy weapons squads from the Lamenter's first company burst out of the Thunderhawk transport's cabin and landed on the ground. They quickly activated their black and white speed-patterned power armor, charging towards their designated target buildings like steel war chariots. Due to direct orders from their Primarch, Rog, unless the mortal agents attacked first or used unknown lethal weapons, the Lamenters had no need to retaliate. Their main mission was to occupy and control. Moreover, with the defensive capabilities of power armor, ordinary physical bullets could hardly cause much damage to the Astartes. However, perhaps Roger's pre-battle speech didn't have much effect. Or perhaps the Lamenters were facing Hydra agents. Accompanied by streaks of large-caliber machine gun bullets tearing through the air and the muzzle flashes of constantly spitting flames. The mortal agents hiding inside the airport control tower and hangars launched an extremely fierce resistance. At this moment, the first company captain, as the Lamenters' company commander, quickly changed the battle plan. The mission objective for all Astartes immediately shifted from occupation and control to an extermination mode. Boom boom boom. In an instant, the ear-splitting roar of numerous bolt guns was presented for the first time on SHIELD territory. Countless Hydra sleeper agents or SHIELD agents who were unaware of the truth, along with some fortifications, were blasted into bloody fragments by the terrifying bolts. And as some of the Astartes who had completed their charge casually drew their roaring chainswords, an even more bloody massacre inevitably unfolded. In fact, even if Rog knew about the current situation, he wouldn't say much. After all, granting the enemy a glorious death on the battlefield was already a rare act of mercy for the Astartes. As for his promise to Rogers, he could only apologize. SHIELD Headquarters. Agent Command Operations Center, the hub. This was a hidden location where most of the space was located inside a vast mountain range in the Colorado Plateau. Since its completion, it had never been attacked or discovered by enemies. But at this moment, the intense sounds of gunfire were constantly ringing out from every part of the base. SHIELD agents and Hydra agents with completely different positions and beliefs were engaged in fierce combat, relying on the complex corridors and terrain. Although it was inevitable that some of them originally belonged to the same camp, they engaged in passionate shooting on the spot due to mutual suspicion or other careful thoughts. But in most of the combat conflicts, the contradictions were between the enemy and us. Rumble rumble. At this moment, accompanied by bursts of ear-piercing alarms and red lights completely covering the entire headquarters base, the only entrance to the hub headquarters was suddenly heavily enveloped by continuous explosions and flames. The next moment, with the sound of heavy metal twisting, 5 Terminators with Cyclone missile launchers installed above their power packs slowly stepped into SHIELD headquarters, facing the fire and smoke that had not yet dissipated. Immediately afterwards, Rog, with metal 10 rings constantly dancing above his head, also drove his vibranium power armor, leading Rogers and Doom and others into the interior of the base. Duggan, Hit Monkey. You go and contact the agent teams in the headquarters, make sure to distinguish who are our people and who are Hydra, understand? Rogers, wearing carapace armor, raised the vibranium shield on his arm and the laser gun in his palm. He turned his head and issued an order to his 2 teammates. Rog, breathing in the smell of gunpowder, also looked at Iron Man David beside him and said, "David, have you taken over the surveillance equipment here? Find crossbones and those Hydra remnants for me. I want to tear them apart with my own hands." "Yes, my lord." The next second, Iron Man David, with blue light flashing in his eyes, shook his metal head slightly. It quickly invaded the surveillance equipment of the hub headquarters and searched for the location of the mission target. "My lord, the target is gathering their manpower in the depths of the base. Some Hydra have already entered vehicles. It seems they want to rush out of the hub headquarters and head to the airport." Iron Man David turned his head without hesitation and reported to Rog. Rog, with a stern expression, suddenly raised a vibranium arm and waved it down heavily. "Doom, you led a few assault squads to assist Rogers in gathering SHIELD agents to clear out Hydra. The Terminator squad will come with me." Rog, who quickly activated his vibranium power armor, rushed into the corridor of the base without looking back. The 5 Terminators immediately reversed their direction and followed closely behind the Primarch. Almost at the same time, deeper within the hub headquarters, Natasha and Hawkeye, who who were searching for secret files from the computer archives, subconsciously exchanged glances. They vaguely heard the extremely familiar intrusion alarm. My boss and Steve have already taken action, we need to speed up here too. Natasha said to her friend Hawkeye without turning her head. When Iron Man David informed them that he had found the real culprit, the two had already sneaked into the hub headquarters. So, in order not to waste this opportunity, Natasha decided to dig deeper into the black material of S.H.I.E.L.D., or rather Nick Fury. It also gave Steve Rogers some leverage to lead S.H.I.E.L.D. in the future. Hawkeye, who pulled out a special composite bow from behind, turned his head to look at another place in the base room. At this moment, Coulson, with a helpless expression on his face, was firmly tied to the ground. I never thought that Captain America himself would invade the hub headquarters, this is really. Seemingly feeling Hawkeye's silent gaze, Coulson subconsciously grinned wryly and said to the other party. Coulson, didn't you hear? Hydra has been lurking in S.H.I.E.L.D. for many years now. I am willing to believe in Captain America's character and judgment, so I will fight for S.H.I.E.L.D. and Captain America. Hawkeye, who casually pulled out an arrow from the quiver behind him, said without raising his head. You are a good person and also a dedicated senior agent, Coulson. Nick Fury, this director, is really derelict in his duty. No matter what the reason, he failed to detect the signs of Hydra's revival. He is no longer a qualified director. I suggest you think carefully, maybe changing a leader is also a good thing. Of course, if you believe in Hydra's set of stupid theories, then just pretend I didn't say anything. At this moment, Coulson's expression seemed much lower after hearing Hawkeye's words. But he still took a deep breath and said, I believe Fury is not the kind of person you see, he should be rushing here now, or he is hiding in a hidden location in the headquarters waiting for the development of the entire situation. In fact, Fury has been avoiding escalating the conflict and contradictions between him and Captain America. Wait, however, at this moment, Natasha, who seemed to have really discovered some deep secrets, suddenly interrupted Coulson's words. She, who had tied up her red hair, turned around and stared at Coulson like an angry lioness, questioning him word by word. Coulson, as Nick Fury's confidant, can you tell us? What the hell is the Cosmic Cube Weaponization Project? Rumble. Accompanied by the ear-piercing sound of metal twisting and breaking. Heavy isolation devices that fell with a bang due to the alarm were torn into countless flying fragments by the wildly dancing metal 10 rings. At this moment, Luo Shaw, driving the vibranium-powered armor, led the Terminator squad along the corridor, continuing to delve deeper into the interior of the S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters. While running quickly, he also grabbed a masterwork bolter from his waist, ready to pull the trigger at any moment. As for how Luo Shaw and the others distinguished whether the personnel they encountered were S.H.I.E.L.D. agents or Hydra agents, that depended on their luck and fortune, if someone listened to Rogers' advice and didn't choose to open fire immediately, then they were a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent. If the other party pulled the trigger without hesitation, then Luo Shaw and the Astartes, without any mercy, would naturally return fire with bolters. After all, in this situation, whether the other party was friendly or not was not important at all. Fortunately, most of the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents inside the hub headquarters were administrative personnel, while the Hydra agents were basically combat personnel. As long as one side was being suppressed and beaten, the side with the most casualties was 80% S.H.I.E.L.D. agents. Boom boom boom. Soon after, Luo Shaw, wearing vibranium-powered armor, rushed into a room similar to an operations hall. Streams of physical bullets spewing from gun muzzles, carrying scorching heat and the sound of wind, immediately assaulted him from all directions. Luo Shaw, who wasn't wearing a vibranium helmet, pointed casually. 5 metal 10 rings rotated rapidly, defending against stray bullets. The other 5 metal 10 rings suspended above his head instantly changed direction and launched a continuous penetrating attack against the metal bunkers and walls where the enemies were located. Chi-chi-chi, accompanied by a series of dull, shattering sounds. Dozens of Hydra agents became the ring's victims in Luo Shaw's hands one after another. As for those S.H.I.E.L.D. agents who were suppressed by the enemy's firepower and didn't even dare to lift their heads, they widened their eyes as if they had seen an angel descending. Even their breathing seemed to stop at this moment, and they didn't move at all. Luo Sha, with a stern expression, didn't care about the casualties of these people. He quickly shifted his gaze, looking at the several corridors leading to different areas within the operations hall. Without hesitation, Luo Sha raised the arm tightly gripping the masterwork bolter and waved it forward fiercely. The 5 Terminators who had been following behind him immediately stepped forward. They each chose the corridors on either side, leaving the middle corridor to the Primarch. If it were a normal raid, the Terminator squad, bearing the task similar to the Primarch's honor guard, would not be so relaxed and comfortable. But along the way, the Astartes, who clearly felt that the enemy's strength was not even as good as the heretical rebels, were 100% confident in the Primarch's safety. Dong dong dong. Luo Sha, casually putting away the masterwork bolter, drew a chainsword from the back of his power pack. He drove the vibranium-powered armor, stepped forward, and walked straight into the middle corridor. As the magnetic boots made heavy sounds alternately, streams of flashing red light from above continuously scattered on Luo Sha's tall metal body, making him look even more like a cruel butcher and god of slaughter from afar. A few minutes later, Luo Sha, expressionless, stepped over the corpses of many fallen SHIELD agents and successfully passed through the corridor to enter a more spacious underground plaza. At this moment, within Luo Sha's field of vision, a sky carrier with a very large volume had just built part of its prototype, and every component all over its body was constantly emitting the unique charm belonging to steel and technology. An unfinished sky carrier, Luo Sha, squinting his eyes, slightly raised his head and carefully looked at the behemoth in front of him. He muttered to himself, "After this matter is over, see if I can snatch this big guy from Roger's hands. If the other party really has difficulties and can't give it, then it's time for David to come on stage and try to steal SHIELD's design blueprints." Buzz buzz buzz. Just at this moment, Luo Sha suddenly heard the roar of a car engine in his ears. He quickly gathered his thoughts and returned to combat readiness while also subconsciously gripping the chainsword in his palm. In an instant, more than a dozen armed jeeps equipped with heavy machine guns sped out from the rear of the sky carrier. These vehicles quickly launched a terrifying charge towards Luo Sha's location. And Luo Sha, who saw Crossbones Rumlow and others in an armed jeep in the convoy at a glance, also unhesitatingly drove the vibranium-powered armor and launched a charge towards the armed jeeps that were speeding towards him. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. In the next moment, before those Hydra agents controlling the heavy machine guns could pull the trigger and concentrate fire, metal 10 rings flying in the air were like incredibly precise arrows, shooting towards the crowd. Those exposed Hydra agents didn't have time to dodge at all. They were completely divided into countless pieces of flesh and blood by the metal 10 rings that cut through the air. Immediately afterward, one of Luo Sha's palms drooped down smoothly. He yanked 2 freezing grenades from the waist of the power armor. Then, without hesitation, he threw them under the leading armed jeep. Crackling. In an instant, countless exploding cold ice crystals burst upwards from the position of the vehicle's chassis, almost forcibly freezing an armed jeep completely in place. And this also triggered a series of chain reactions. The dozen or so armed jeeps in the rear of the convoy didn't have time to dodge or brake. Each driver could only watch as their vehicle collided with the cold ice blocking the road. At this moment, Luo Sha, driving the vibranium-powered armor and continuing to charge, had successfully arrived in front. He stepped hard on the ice and ice crystals in front. The extremely heavy metal body instantly leapt into the air. The chainsword in his palm also made a very ear-piercing roar. Squeak squeak squeak. The rapidly rotating sharp saw teeth easily embedded into the interior of the second armed jeep like a hot knife cutting butter. Luo Sha, who had just landed, pulled hard at will. Those Hydra agents who subconsciously raised their guns were immediately cut into cruel corpses that could only emit violent wails. At the same time, metal 10 rings that moved with Luo Sha's thoughts also quickly made offensive reactions. The metal 10 rings, which could compete with the blood scythe with unknown materials, continuously passed through the armed jeeps that had collided, and also completely strangled those Hydra agents who planned to get out of the car and launch an attack.
Rumble. Just when Luo Sha thought he had successfully solved all the Hydra agents. Accompanied by a roaring explosion, an armed jeep with a very broken metal shell, one of its doors was kicked open violently. Crossbones Rumlow, with a pair of strength-enhancing devices installed on his arms, widened his eyes. With eyes wide open in anger, he pounced head-on towards Luo Sha, who was wearing vibranium-powered armor, like a trapped beast. Hail Hydra! Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. HMPH. A cold snort escaped from the stern-faced Luo Sha. He tightened his grip on the chainsword roaring in his palm. Then, without hesitation, he stepped forward and violently collided head-on with Crossbones Rumlow. Clang clang clang, accompanied by the loud sound of metal colliding. Luo Sha allowed the force amplification device from Crossbones Rumlow to land heavily on his vibranium chest armor, carrying a whistling wind. Unfortunately, his tall metal body remained as still as a small mountain. Bang! Instead, Crossbones Rumlow, whose expression suddenly changed, staggered back several steps due to the powerful recoil force brought by the vibranium. The opponent immediately wanted to change his attack direction, specifically targeting Luo Sha's head, which was undefended. Whoosh! At this moment, Luo Sha, whose cold gaze overlooked Crossbones Rumlow, suddenly raised a vibranium arm. One by one, the metal 10 rings dancing back and forth in midair quickly sheathed onto his raised vibranium arm as if weary birds returning to their nests. The next second, accompanied by Luo Sha's swift and fierce vibranium iron fist. One by one, the metal 10 rings, filled with purple energy, struck heavily against Crossbones Rumlow's chest like a storm surge. Clang clang clang. At this moment, Crossbones Rumlow, who was spitting out large amounts of scarlet blood mist, couldn't even manage a basic evasive reaction. His entire person fell heavily to the ground a dozen meters away like a rag doll. If Crossbones Rumlow wasn't wearing a heavy bulletproof vest made of special materials, Luo Sha's attack just now would have completely ended his life. Even so, Crossbones Rumlow, who had completely endured the fierce impact of the metal 10 rings, had already entered a heavily injured state. After landing, he continuously spat out large amounts of blood and internal organ fragments from his mouth. Even though Crossbones Rumlow's willpower was still quite tenacious. However, as a mortal, he was ultimately unable to escape the cruel constraints of reality. Thump thump thump. The next moment, Luo Sha, driving the vibranium power armor, stepped forward and casually put away the roaring chainsword. With a blank expression, he walked to the front of Crossbones Rumlow. Luo Sha glanced down at the opponent, who was slowly squirming backward. His tall metal body slightly bent down, grabbed Crossbones Rumlow's neck, and slowly lifted him into the air. I said I would tear you apart alive, and I will definitely tear you apart alive. Cough cough cough, hiss hiss hiss. Assassinating your TerraStar Realm Legion's logistics personnel might have been a wrong decision, but, Hydra, hiss hiss hiss. Cut off one head, grow two heads. Crossbones Rumlow, whose neck was tightly pinched by the vibranium hand, subconsciously revealed a distorted sneer. He squeezed out a garbled sentence with extremely labored breathing from between his blood-filled teeth. Oh, I'd like to see if you can actually grow another head? However, Luo Sha, whose face only showed coldness and killing intent, sneered. While raising another vibranium hand, he gripped the opponent's neck position from above and below in two directions, and then began to pull outward with force. Change source app, and view the latest chapters of this book on multiple sites at the same time. Close black lens bracket. Almost instantly, accompanied by Crossbones Rumlow's constantly twitching and trembling broken body, as well as a final, tragic roar from deep within his throat. A bloody severed head, along with some snow-white bones, was forcibly pulled out of the opponent's body by Luo Sha like pulling out a radish. Too bad, you don't have Deadpool's immortality. At this moment, Luo Sha, whose eyes were icy, stared at the hideous head in the vibranium palm, which was obviously not reconciled to death, and faintly issued a taunt. He casually threw down the severed head. Then, driving the vibranium power armor,
he turned and walked towards the armed jeeps that were flowing with viscous blood. Soon after, Luo Sha successfully found the broken corpse of another Hydra leader, Sitwell, from the metal shell of the wrecked vehicle. Luo Sha turned his gaze to look at the other party's tragic death, and then looked at the severed head not far away. He finally confirmed that these Hydra leaders lurking in S.H.I.E.L.D. had been completely cleaned up. Of course, there are still many stubbornly resisting Hydra agents who are enduring the double attack from the Astartes and Captain America. However, as time goes by, these enemies will not be able to hold on for much longer. Thump thump thump. Finally, Luo Sha glanced at the desolate battlefield and unhesitatingly retracted all the metal 10 rings. He started the vibranium power armor and turned to walk towards a passage around the base plaza. The outcome of this short battle has been decided. From now on, the organization of Hydra will no longer exist in the native world, right? Hiss. Accompanied by a heavy breathing rhythm like a dying person gasping for air. A pale human body, which had been immersed in a viscous liquid for a long time, suddenly opened its bloodshot eyes. Countless viscous liquids wrapping the other party's naked body quickly drained outward. Chi-chi-chi-chi. Dozens of seconds later, the viscous liquid was completely drained. And as the subtle sound of this high-tech product, whose overall shape resembled a metal coffin, slowly opened its hatch. The slender hands and feet of the bald man, completely out of control, wearing a breathing device covering half of his face, fell heavily onto the cold metal floor. Immediately afterward, he couldn't help but curl up his exposed pale body and shiver. Tisk tisk, Rumlow, I told you long ago that your Hydra's ideas and beliefs are all defective products, spiritual garbage that has been abandoned by the human era. Moreover, I also warned you that without a complete and sure victory, don't provoke the Terra Star Realm Legion, those technologically powerful killing machines simply won't reason with you. Look, now you've even lost your basic foundation lurking within S.H.I.E.L.D. It's just a pity that Alexander Pierce died a little too early, his identity and position were still somewhat useful to me. At this moment, a middle-aged man wearing an exquisite and crisp dark blue suit, sitting in the corner of the room, constantly signing a large number of documents without even raising his head, said, "Cough cough cough, Mr. President, considering that I have been lurking in the two organizations of Hydra and S.H.I.E.L.D. for more than 10 years, and have passed on countless important intelligence to everyone, help me get revenge. I want that guy who killed me to die without a burial place. I want to destroy the Terrastar Realm Legion." The next moment, Rumlow, who was trying to curl up on the cold floor, seemed to finally regain his basic sanity. He very weakly raised his pale bald head, stared intently at the middle-aged man not far away, and roared in a low voice. "Heh heh, Rumlow, how can you still be so naive after being a double agent for so many years? Now, you have no value to me anymore. On the contrary, to some extent, why should I offend the Terrastar Realm Legion, which has a considerable force, for a worthless pawn like you? Not to mention, now these people are still mixed up with S.H.I.E.L.D. Captain America, who shouts about freedom and justice every day, is enough to give me a headache. I don't want to ask for trouble." Hearing Rumlow's words, the middle-aged man stopped the action of continuing to sign the documents. He slowly raised his head, his black hair neatly trimmed, revealing a weathered face with skin that was still fairly tight and angular. If one were to exclude the special environment and emotionless conversation of the other party's current location, then this person even looks more like a Captain America transitioning from middle age to old age. Of course, this refers to the unique temperament exuding from the other party and the first impression given to others. Also, do you know how much technology and funding it takes to barely complete such a life substitute device that can bring a second chance at life? Even I haven't been able to use this high-tech product. Giving it to you in advance can be considered as clearing all the friendship between you and me. Rumlow, you can leave, I won't see you off. I still have to attend a press conference later." At this moment, the middle-aged man, whose expression on his face was a half-smile, said to Rumlow on the ground as if selling off a negative acid. However, Rumlow, whose heart was full of resentment and unwillingness, took a deep breath. He did not hesitate to threaten the middle-aged man in a low voice. "Aren't you afraid that I will make all the truths I know public? If the entire nation knew that their most beloved Mr. President is..." "Rumlow,
Why don't you brainless Hydra brutes understand what it means to know when to stop? At this moment, the middle-aged man, whose gentle eyes instantly turned into icy killing intent, immediately raised his hand to interrupt Rumlow's unfinished words. He stared at the other party not far away, almost word for word, and said, "Since you really don't want to leave, then never leave. General Ross, come and kill him for me. Remember to make the process cruel." At this moment, the middle-aged man's inhuman words had just fallen. Boom! Accompanied by the shards of the violently exploding door and a roaring loud noise. A red giant with a height of about 3 meters suddenly revealed his huge figure. The next second, the red giant, who couldn't help but reveal a grim smile, rushed towards Rumlow, whose face was full of horror, like a terrifying monster. "Happy to serve you, Mr. Osborne." Dong, dong, dong. Accompanied by continuous crashing sounds, the circular vibranium shield bounced back and forth in the dimly lit corridor like a metal flea. The edge of the shield constantly collided with the bodies of Hydra agents, causing severe internal injuries. Rogers, clad in heavy armor, relied on his now bulletproof and sturdy body. He charged into the enemy ranks, enduring their firepower, and ended the battle with a few punches and kicks. Close black lens bracket bang. In the next second, Rogers abruptly raised a thick arm and caught the vibranium shield that was bouncing towards the top of his head without turning around. "Captain, the enemies here should all be cleared out. Most of the administrative staff and wounded have been transferred to safe locations and are being personally identified by that Mr. David who calls himself Iron Man. Moreover, those giants wearing heavy armor are too bloody in combat. They always fire several shots before wielding their chainsaw weapons for close combat. I don't think Hydra can resist for long." Just then, a slender figure with a vigorous stride led a team of agents to Rogers' vicinity. She immediately held her gun and began to execute the wounded Hydra agents who didn't have obvious injuries, while her gaze also looked at the captain in front and said, "Agent 13, my friend's Astartes unit is specifically used to fight against non-humans. Perhaps more cruel combat methods will have a greater effect. Speaking of which, I am very pleased that you can take up a gun and lead the agents to resist Hydra. This requires great courage." At this moment, Rogers, casually tightening the vibranium shield straps, turned his head slightly. He smiled slightly in the direction of Agent 13. "Captain, I am, after all, a member of the Carter family. Even if I can betray anyone, I will not betray S.H.I.E.L.D. and you." Hearing the praise from the captain, Agent 13, holding a gun, also subconsciously revealed a fleeting faint smile. "By the way, where is Agent Hill? Why hasn't she come forward to command the team? She's not likely to be Hydra, is she?" Rogers seemed to remember something. He suddenly asked Agent 13 with a serious expression. "Captain, not only Agent Hill, but our dear Director of S.H.I.E.L.D., Nick Fury, completely lost contact in the early stages of your attack. Whether he is a good person or a bad person, his evasive behavior has made everyone feel deeply disappointed. How can this kind of person continue to be the leader of S.H.I.E.L.D.? Agent 13, having finished the mopping up operation, stepped forward. Her gaze fixed on Rogers, and she said earnestly, "Agent 13, although I have irreconcilable conflicts and contradictions with Nick Fury, and even our positions are different, I believe he is not as bad as you think, but what I find very puzzling is, what exactly does Nick Fury want to do? He doesn't seem like the kind of shallow person who would abandon his ideals for the sake of immediate interests." Rogers frowned slightly and subconsciously shook his head. After taking a deep breath, he continued, "If there are no unforeseen circumstances, I will shoulder the responsibility of leading S.H.I.E.L.D. Perhaps because of HYDRA's infiltration, S.H.I.E.L.D. itself will lose a lot of rights and interests in the special zone politicians, but our team of agents has stubbornly survived. As long as everyone is still alive, S.H.I.E.L.D. will have hope of rising again. Come on, Agent 13, let us end this battle." "Yes, Captain, no, I should call you Director." Rogers' words had just fallen. Agent 13 nodded without hesitation. Dash 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 dash. About 3 hours later, with the dissipation of the final sonic boom,
The chaos in S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters gradually subsided.
The Lamenters, wearing speed-type power armor, quickly completed the special mission of searching the entire headquarters base.
And the initiator of the mission was Iron Man David, who had received some hints from Shaw. Subsequently, the Astartes, carrying some document hard drives, leisurely gathered outside the base. And Shaw, driving the vibranium power armor, met with Rogers and others once again. He casually informed the other party of the major news that the Hydra leader lurking in S.H.I.E.L.D. had been completely eliminated. Just as Shaw and Rogers were discussing how to proceed with the next step, Natasha, with her red hair tied up, and her friend Hawkeye, brought an agent who was firmly bound to the crowd. Shaw, with a calm expression, turned his head and saw that the agent with a wry smile on his face was none other than the old acquaintance Coulson. At this moment, Natasha, with a hint of anger between her brows, first greeted Shaw, then nodded in the direction of Rogers. Finally, she spoke to the crowd. "Lord Shaw, according to my judgment, Nick Fury has 100% escaped and gone into hiding, and the thing he was willing to give up the entire S.H.I.E.L.D. for is an alien technology product called the Tesseract." The Tesseract? Isn't that the ancient technology that Red Skull led Hydra to find back then? How do I remember that it shouldn't exist in S.H.I.E.L.D.'s hands? Instead, it should be lying in the deep sea?
Rogers, listening intently, was slightly stunned.
He then asked with a frown. That's because Howard Stark later salvaged this thing from the seabed in order to search for your whereabouts, and Nick Fury actually attempted to re-engineer the Tesseract into an energy weapon, and even wanted to create a superweapon far exceeding the power of a nuclear bomb. Natasha's gaze fell on Roger's face. She sneered sarcastically. "Damn it. I told others before that Nick Fury couldn't be so degenerate. He must have his own ideas and difficulties. But how is his current behavior any different from the Red Skull who wanted to use the Tesseract to conquer the world back then? He's just too disappointing to me."
Rogers, whose face gradually turned cold, took a deep breath. He shook his head slightly and cursed in a low voice. "Captain, please allow me to say one more thing." Just then, Coulson, with a wry smile on his face, suddenly spoke to the crowd.
"Mr. Shaw, you're probably the true leader of the Terrastar Realm Legion, right?"
In fact, the slum massacre back then was the last straw that broke Nick Fury's back.
Originally, the arrival of Thor and the other aliens put Fury in a state of anxiety. Although I cannot fully know his true thoughts, I can also see that Fury is willing to make the necessary sacrifices to protect humanity. But he has always been indecisive. It was not until the slum tragedy occurred that Nick Fury deeply realized that humanity has entered a new era, and he must make corresponding changes in order to save the future of humanity. However, before Coulson could finish his words, Luo Shaw, who subconsciously chuckled, shifted his gaze. He looked down at the bound Coulson and said in an icy tone, "Well, after all this time, this blame has come back to me."
"It doesn't matter, our Terrastar Realm Legion isn't some superhero organization. My Astartes are battlefield killers, bloodthirsty butchers, and terrorists in the eyes of civilians."
But Coulson, as a confidant of the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. and a rare high-level agent, you can't possibly be unaware of the truth about the blood cult's human sacrifices and their attempt to create a vampire race, right? At that time, where was the responsibility that your S.H.I.E.L.D. should have shouldered? Isn't the future of humanity something that Nick Fury, in your words, needs to save? Are the poor people of Mexico not human?
Also, I'm telling everyone clearly that if anything goes wrong or unexpected happens regarding the Cosmic Cube, Nick Fury's dog life alone won't be enough to compensate for humanity's great losses. So, Nick Fury is dead for sure. I said it, no one can save him. Luo Shaw said each word with a cold expression. Natasha, her eyes also filled with anger, strode forward and stood beside Luo Shaw. Hawkeye hesitated slightly. He turned his head to look at Captain America, whose expression was somewhat stiff.
Then, he shook his head slightly and chose to stand with Natasha. At this moment, an invisible rift faintly appeared among the originally harmonious group.
It also seemed to represent that they would ultimately not become comrades on the same path.
Luo Shaw, I can represent all S.H.I.E.L.D. agents in immediately removing Nick Fury from all positions. He will be wanted by official forces worldwide. If your people discover his whereabouts, then he is yours. S.H.I.E.L.D. will not engage in any conflict with you." At this moment, Rogers, whose mind was racing, preemptively broke the silence. He gazed sincerely at Luo Sha in front of him and said in a solemn tone. After all, Luo Sha had just helped S.H.I.E.L.D. eliminate the internal Hydra forces. And it hadn't caused too many casualties. Plus, he personally owed the other party a life. After considering all these factors, Rogers quickly chose to yield. After Luo Sha pondered for a moment, he suddenly narrowed his eyes and slowly said, "Okay, but to compensate for the operational costs of helping S.H.I.E.L.D., Rogers, I have a bold idea." You can tell me first and let me hear it. If it's not too excessive, we can discuss it slowly." Rogers, understanding the implication in Luo Sha's words, was slightly taken aback. He immediately switched his identity from a superhero to the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. and then shook his head helplessly. Boom boom boom, soon after. As the Thunderhawk transports gradually took off, the Lamenters, having completed their warm-up, left S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters one after another. Luo Sha, who always had a smile on his lips, also said goodbye to Rogers, whose face was very unsightly. He quickly led Iron Man David and Doom and others into the last Thunderhawk. From now on, S.H.I.E.L.D.'s helicarrier was successfully renamed and became the property of Primarch Luo Sha. Of course, this wasn't just Luo Sha simply making exorbitant demands and taking a big bite out of S.H.I.E.L.D. It was also the result of Rogers' own careful consideration. Don't think that he has now successfully become the new director of S.H.I.E.L.D. because of the love of the vast majority of agents. In fact, his war has just begun. The new battlefield is the power struggle with national politicians. Rogers didn't want S.H.I.E.L.D.'s technology and creations to once again become playthings in the hands of politicians, and he didn't want to retrace the old path that Nick Fury had walked. And S.H.I.E.L.D. and he personally did Luo Sha a huge favor. So, he went along with the flow and gave the unfinished helicarrier to the other party. However, Luo Sha couldn't transport this big guy away right now. He planned to return to Gemini Island base and ask Wong for help, using a mage's portal to solve the problem once and for all. Dong dong dong. At this moment, Luo Sha, sitting in the cockpit seat driving the vibranium-powered armor, slowly disappeared, the smile on his lips. Open black lens bracket. The problem of slow updates in new chapters has finally been solved on the app that can change sources. Download Wanyuan app to change sources and view the latest chapters of this book on multiple sites at the same time. Close black lens bracket. He immediately turned his head to look at Iron Man David, who was walking towards the cockpit, and said in a low voice, "David, from now on, hack into the world's networks and cameras and find Nick Fury's whereabouts as soon as possible. At the same time, order several Astartes squads to be on standby for a long time. Once the other party is found, immediately send people to carry out a raid. However, remember that the focus of the mission is not Nick Fury's dog life, but the cosmic cube he took away." "Understood, my lord. I will remember this matter firmly and make it a top priority." Iron Man David paused. It slightly shook its metal head and said without hesitation, "Lord Luo Sha, is the cosmic cube really that important? If the problem is serious, why don't I personally lead the team?" At this moment, Doom, sitting opposite in the cabin, raised his metal helmet. He asked Luo Sha with a puzzled tone. Natasha and Hawkeye, who had been silent, also subconsciously looked at Luo Sha. "The cosmic cube is actually not important. The space stone hidden inside is what I want to get. This is an infinity stone produced by the Big Bang of the native universe, possessing the most basic and most powerful conceptual power in the entire universe. Space, time, reality, power, soul, mind, if these 6 infinity stones are combined into one through the infinity gauntlet, then it will give the user an almost creation-like terrifying power. And only a simple trigger action is needed to completely erase half or all of the life in the entire universe. Now, we already have the infinity gauntlet, and the first space stone has gradually revealed its traces. It's a pity that if it weren't for the restrictions of various realistic factors, I only need to continue waiting for a suitable time and opportunity, and I can have several infinity stones at once.
However, even if we only control one Infinity Stone, and no matter which one it is, we can completely destroy the crazy plan of a terrifying alien enemy in the depths of the universe, which can also be regarded as a way to solve the ultimate problem.
Luo Sha, narrowing his eyes, hesitated slightly. He still earnestly told everyone present the truth about the Infinity Stones. Doom and others, upon hearing a series of truths, first had blank expressions, and then extremely shocked expressions gradually appeared on their faces.
Finally, Doom, who had reacted, said to Luo Sha in a deep voice without hesitation.
Lord Luo Sha, such a precious thing that is so important and involves countless lives. I must personally lead the team to carry out the raid, so as to ensure that our process of obtaining the Infinity Stone is foolproof. Okay, let's do it that way. You're more cautious in your work, and you make me feel the most at ease. Luo Sha, with a calm expression, nodded slightly.
Agreed to Doom's request. Immediately afterwards, his gaze suddenly shifted to Hawkeye. Speak, this new friend, what are your thoughts on this?
Now that you know so many secrets, are you still willing to join my team? If Hawkeye's disillusionment with S.H.I.E.L.D. stemmed from Nick Fury's abandonment and Hydra's infiltration,
then the gradual shattering of Roger's idealized image of Captain America
was the true source of his despondency. It was also the specific reason he chose to stand with Natasha. At this moment, Hawkeye, having heard many secrets and completely abandoned his retirement plans, lowered his head in contemplation. Subsequently, he said to Rogel with a solemn tone, "Mr. Rogel, I won't say that I can definitely understand your combat philosophy, nor will I fawn over you out of fear of your power. I can only say that I want to stay here and see what happens, specifically because I trust my good friend Natasha, and also, from your words, I can tell that the Earth and humanity itself may face many disasters in the future. I just want to do my part as a human being. Of course, it's difficult for me to get carried away with enthusiasm and rush into battle. I'm middle-aged, not to mention I have to spend a lot of energy taking care of my own family, and I hope you can understand." However, Hawkeye's honest words caused Rogel to nod slightly.
He said to the other party with a gentle expression,
"Hawkeye, I like your straightforward attitude. You can currently follow Natasha's side and assist her with some basic action missions. If you gradually adapt, I will give you other responsibilities, and even if after a period of time, you think my team's style doesn't fit your philosophy, you can also have the right to withdraw, which is a kind of reward for your honest expression. The departure or retention of a mere mortal agent is not important.
After all, Rogel can't just brainwash everyone he meets who seems like a suitable team member."
Although compared to the ruthless practices of the Imperium of Man, Rogel, as a Primarch, is relatively restrained. He believes that although he may not be aware of it, he should still possess some personal charm.
Even if the Primarch's own charm doesn't work, the friendly atmosphere within the core team is something to be commended.
However, at this moment, Iron Man David in the cockpit suddenly twisted his metal head.
The blue light in his eye sockets flickered, quietly observing the communication inside the cabin, but he did not choose to speak.
Clearly, it was because some things were not suitable for Hawkeye, who had not yet integrated into the team, to fully know. About several hours later, the Thunderhawk flight formation temporarily landed on the landing platform of the Imperial Manufactory. Hawkeye, who had temporarily joined Rogel's team, needed to move his family. Although Rogers had become the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., Hawkeye simply didn't believe that the politicians in the Special Zone would tolerate a senior agent's defection.
And Natasha also asked Rogel for instructions. She wanted to help Hawkeye move and also meet his family.
Rogel agreed to the other party's request without hesitation,
and instructed Natasha that if she needed more help, she could call a stormtrooper squad at any time.
After Hawkeye and Natasha left together, Doom, draped in a dark green cloak, also activated his power armor and stood up. He was assigned 2 Astartes combat squads by Rogel and needed to stay at the Imperial Manufactory for a period of time. Open black lens bracket. The problem of slow updates in new chapters has finally been solved on the app that can change sources. Download Wanyuan app here to change sources and view the latest chapters of this book on multiple sites at the same time. Close black lens bracket. In the short term, Nick Fury, having lost the protection of his identity, would find it difficult to escape the American continent. Because Iron Man David was not the only one targeting him.
Even the artificial intelligence Jarvis, because he was David's apprentice, had allocated some of his computing power to track the other party's whereabouts.
Perhaps there would soon be a successful or unsuccessful result, and the Space Stone in the Tesseract would also come under Rogel's control. At this moment, Doom shook his metal helmet in Rogel's direction, and then left the dimly lit interior of the cabin.
And Rogel, turning his gaze, suddenly looked towards Iron Man David's cockpit.
David, did you have something you wanted to tell me just now? Rogel, with a calm expression, slowly asked. My lord, this matter is neither big nor small. There were outsiders here just now, and I couldn't fully report to you.
When we were out, the Sage Neil and Reductus left at the Gemini Island base had a small friction. Don't worry, none of the forging factory's production lines have stopped, nor have any problems occurred. Although there was a conflict between them, they have not forgotten the important things and their responsibilities. Oh, it seems Reductus needs to be repaired again. I clearly warned him, the person in charge of this forging factory, before.
Rogel frowned slightly and sighed softly. However, Iron Man David seemed to have a different view on this, and the blue light in his eye sockets flickered as he said.
My lord, this time I don't think it's really Reductus's responsibility. The specific situation should wait until we return to the Gemini Island base, and you can ask them personally.
Then let's go, David. Rogel nodded slightly and took a deep breath. He closed his eyes and rested his mind.
Rumble, rumble. More than a dozen Thunderhawk transports slowly landed on the landing platform inside Longzhi Island. The Thunderhawk transport carrying Rogel did not land, but instead flew directly towards the sky above Sizzy Island.
Rumble. However, a series of explosions from whirlwind missiles caused Rogel to suddenly open his eyes.
David, what happened? Rogel, with a serious expression, turned his head and asked in a deep voice towards the cockpit. My lord, probably Reductus and Sage Neil have started fighting again. David, open the hatch. Rogel took a deep breath and abruptly activated his vibranium power armor and stood up.
He stepped towards the front of the metal hatch that was gradually opening. Then he leaned out his head and quickly scanned the area below Sizzy Island.
At this moment, on a large desolate area outside the forging factory, countless explosion craters and the metal wreckage of automatic servo robots were scattered all over the ground.
Not far away, Sage Neil, wearing a red sage robe, held a gear-shaped power axe in both hands, and scorching red lasers continuously sprayed out from the special device added to the power axe.
And that Castellan robot, equipped with partial artificial intelligence, was leading dozens of automatic servo robots in a continuous charge attack towards another intelligent control legion. If the combat power and performance of Sage Neil's side were still within Rogel's expectations, then Reductus, who was frantically confronting Sage Neil, could be said to have greatly exceeded his imagination.
Looking around, surrounded by hundreds of automatic servo robots. A huge metal creation, up to 5 meters tall, with the basic shape of a Terminator power armor on its entire armor shell. But with limbs and even a torso cast from Antarctic vibranium that could undergo more special changes like the Transformers in science fiction works, was constantly erupting with angry roars while wearing a servo skull shell cast from primitive vibranium. Damn machine oil heretic. Taste the wrath of the Omnissiah. Accompanied by Redutus's incessant, furious roars. The massive metallic construct that had been standing on the ground rapidly transformed into a mobile firing platform with 4 pairs of metallic limbs sprouting from a vibranium chassis. In the next second, whirlwind missiles, rapidly spinning as they emerged, soared from the armory, leaving cleared trails across the sky. They unleashed a barrage of covering fire upon the Servitor robot assault force led by Castellan robots. Having undoubtedly undergone modifications by Sage Neil, the Castellan robots, now even more agile, calculated the landing points of the whirlwind missiles. Simultaneously, they brandished their power scythes, repeatedly charging into the defensive lines composed of numerous automated servitor robots directly in front of Redutus. At that moment, countless metallic fragments and laser beams danced across the sky, faintly resembling the battlefield of a Mechanicus civil war. Rumble, rumble. Instantly, the deafening roars of countless explosions and the rising flames illuminated Rock's bronze face, as cold and indifferent as ice.
He couldn't help but sneer, and without turning his head, he sternly questioned Iron Man David in the cockpit.
"David, is this what you call a minor skirmish? From where I'm standing, it looks like they're about to bash each other's brains out." Subsequently, Roche, wearing a stern expression, didn't wait for Iron Man David to reply. He activated his vibranium power armor, turned around, and reached out to grab the vibranium helmet and the blood scythe from the cabin wall. Thump, thump, thump. Donning the vibranium helmet and carrying the blood scythe on his back, Roche unhesitatingly activated his magnetic boots, and the entire figure rapidly descended towards the battlefield below.
Whoosh! In the blink of an eye, Roche, suspended in midair, quickly waved his arms.
Metallic 10 rings, swirling with purple energy, rapidly rotated around his towering metallic frame. They continuously positioned themselves beneath his magnetic boots, quickly mitigating the various dangers brought about by the descent. Boom! Seconds later, Rock's magnetic boots heavily stomped into the depths of the damp soil, littered with countless metallic fragments and shattered shrapnel.
He seized the momentum, drew the green glowing blood scythe from behind his power pack, and tightly gripped it in his palm.
After scanning the scene through his visor, Roche abruptly changed direction, initiating a head-on collision with a Castellan robot that showed no signs of dodging. Shriek, shriek, shriek. In a single exchange, the massive Castellan robot had its limbs forcibly severed by the blood scythe in Rock's palm, its heavy metallic torso crashing heavily into the mud. The next moment, Roche, wearing the vibranium helmet, abruptly swung his thick arm.
Metallic 10 rings, streaking across the sky, swiftly flew forward, utterly destroying Sage Neil's cog-powered axe and a mechanically constructed arm.
Immediately afterward, Roche, having re-gripped the blood scythe in his palm, once again changed direction. He charged like an ironclad war chariot into the terrifying ranks of automated servitor robots surrounding Redditus. Clack, 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 as Rock's blood scythe swung wildly. These automated servitor robots, instantly deprived of their ability to resist, were swiftly cleaved into piles of metallic parts, like targets on a training range. However, Roche, having successfully traversed the battlefield and arrived in front of Redditus's massive metallic construct, did not cease his attack. "Ah, Primarch, have mercy. Please don't dismantle, this thing is a pain to build." Even though he had already heard the pleading voice emanating from the servo skull, Roche, devoid of any emotional change, still abruptly raised the blood scythe in his palm.
He brought his hand down, forcefully hacking at this technological marvel that appeared extremely precious from the outside.
It wasn't until the metallic construct, forcibly breached by the Necron weapon, clearly revealed the servo skull casing forged from pristine vibranium, that Roche, activating his vibranium power armor to retreat a step, slowly ceased his offensive posture and stood in place, wielding the blood scythe. "Don't you like combat and conflict? Then why don't you come and fight me directly? I can play with you all day. Even a week wouldn't be a problem."
The deep voice slowly emanated from Rock's vibranium helmet, like thunder shaking the gloomy sky.
He first glanced at Redditus, who was feigning death inside the wreckage, and then looked towards Sage Neil, clutching his severed arm in the distance.
"Just because I'm a Primarch, you're afraid to attack. Then why were you so willing to personally intervene and fight before? You have quite the audacity. Primarch, I'm truly wronged. It's all that oil-slicked hag's fault. She forced me to do it. If it weren't for her, I wouldn't have brought out my factory's treasure. It's over, all my treasures are ruined."
At this moment, Redditus hastily used its short mechanical arms to lift the vibranium skull casing covering its yellowish skull.
It activated its anti-gravity engine and tremulously detached itself from the wreckage, hurriedly explaining to Roche in front of it.
"Enough. Both of you shut your mouths. I don't want to hear your excuses right now, David. You temporarily take over the manufacturing plant's production tasks, and let those two obedient oil lickers maintain the production line's operation. As for you two, from today onwards, all your positions and privileges are revoked." Roche, activating his vibranium power armor, lifted the blood scythe.
he coldly stated to the two individuals on the battlefield, his voice filled with indifference. Subsequently, Roche turned around without looking back and moved his heavy steps towards the direction of Chilled Island. Not long after, Roche, wearing vibranium power armor, was cutting food beside a metal round table. And directly across from him, on the metal floor, Sage Neil, wearing red sage robes, and Reditus, hovering in midair, were at least 10 meters apart, quietly awaiting Rock's summons. You can now explain what exactly happened that required the use of force to resolve the issue.
If you believe it's a clash of Mechanicus ideologies, I can let you continue fighting, at least until one of you dies.
Moreover, I truly struggle to understand the thought processes of you oil lickers. Quite a few people have come to the Twins Isle base, but you Mechanicus guys are the only ones who constantly give me headaches, always causing some trouble.
Roche, raising his hand to wipe the grease from the corner of his mouth, slowly raised his short, graying head. He stared at Sage Neil and Reditus and sternly spoke, his tone filled with sarcasm and dissatisfaction. Respected Primarch, this time it is indeed my responsibility. I previously attempted to ease the strained relationship between Reditus and myself, but due to misunderstandings in communication between our language programs, a conflict arose, leading to the current awkward situation. I personally am willing to bear any punishment. At this moment, Sage Neil, sparks occasionally erupting from his severed arm, preemptively bowed towards Roche. Then, she explained in a calm tone. Roche, expressionless, slightly raised an eyebrow. His gaze swept towards Reditus not far away. Reditus, you speak, consider carefully the consequences of concealing anything.
Hearing Rock's words, the servo-skull Reditus's eye sockets flickered red. It finally chose to tell Roche the complete truth, without any embellishments.
The reason for the complete outbreak of armed conflict was simple. Sage Neil had inadvertently mentioned the planetary exploration mission that Reditus had once participated in and failed, resulting in his death. She even expressed a certain degree of sarcasm and disrespect towards the guide who had led Reditus to join the Mechanicus, or rather, his teacher, Archmagios Fastinius.
This undoubtedly ignited the dissatisfaction that Reditus had been accumulating since Neil's arrival.
Thus, Reditus, overwhelmed by anger, recklessly brought out the secret weapon that it had been diligently studying and researching, the miniature Night Titan, considered the treasured possession of the manufacturing plant, and engaged in a battle to the death with Sage Neil. In fact, according to the Servo Skull's initial plan,
it and Sage Neil would embark on a path of mutual destruction together.
Either Sage Neil would be killed by it, and Roche would execute it upon his return. Or it would be defeated by the opponent and die on the spot, but Roche would not let Sage Neil live for long after his return. In short, it could be said that Reditus, whose personality was always slippery, had chosen to gamble his life for the first time in order to defend his beliefs and his past. For more thrilling fanfiction stories like this, check out my channel Fanfic Audiobook. Dive into epic adventures, mysterious realms, and legendary journeys brought to life through immersive storytelling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing audiobooks.